Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast. If you're tuning in for the very first time, this might not be the best one for you to tune into initially, but either way, you're here. This is an Ask Me Anything. So what I'm going to be doing today is fielding questions from our Facebook group, which you can find at facebook.com/groups/Order of Man. I want to say we have roughly 74,000 members over there now. So the Facebook group continues to grow. The Iron Council, which is our exclusive brotherhood, continues to grow. The store continues to do very well. We have some new products, shirts, hats, decals, patches, battle planners, flags, all coming in over the next several weeks. So make sure you check that out. If you want to support what we're doing here, that's a great way to do it. Store.orderofman.com. Outside of that, just share the message. If you've listened for any amount of time and you found any value in what we're doing here, then just share this message. Share the podcast with somebody you know, somebody who needs to hear it. Leave a rating and review, all that kind of stuff. Guys, if you have been around for a while, you know this one's a little different for an Ask Me Anything because usually and typically I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Kip Sorensen. He said he couldn't make it today. I think he's doing some business training or something like that. So you're going to get me. I'm flying solo today. But I've got the questions pulled up here on my phone in the Facebook group. Again, facebook.com/group/Order of Man. And I'm going to attempt to get through as many as I possibly can. I am going to be picking and choosing on some of these questions because as we do continue to grow, it's becoming increasingly difficult to answer all of these questions. So I'm going to try to extract and pull out the best ones. All right, let's get into it, guys. The first one comes from Zach Rafus. And now, see, I'm pronouncing the names today, and you can see I usually give Kip a hard time for his mispronunciation. But now you're going to see how bad I butcher these things, which is why I even brought a co-host on, just so he could butcher the names, and I didn't have to take any sort of responsibility for that. All right, Zach Rafus, however you pronounce it. He says, how do you get over mistakes and regret? Well, the first thing I think you need to realize and understand is that regrets are just part of life. All right, they're going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall short. You're going to make dumb decisions. These things happen. So if you just come to terms with the fact that they are going to happen, not that you want it to, and not that you're going to continue to make dumb mistakes just because life happens, but that it is going to happen. It's just part of life. That's number one. Step number two, learn from it. Guys, it's that simple. And I know it's a challenge. I know it's not easy. I know there's emotions and guilt and remorse and sorrow and loss that we experience when we make mistakes and we have regrets, but there's nothing you can do about it in moving backwards and in the past. Only what you can do now, presently, and moving into the future. And so if you make a mistake, chalk it up to a lesson. Chalk it up to a learning experience. Then ask yourself critically and analyze, okay, well, that was something I shouldn't have done. So what do I need to do differently moving forward? Then, in a way, you can begin to appreciate the mistakes or regrets if you reframe them as learning experiences or lessons. I've made plenty of mistakes here with Order of Man. I've spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in what my friend Pete Roberts calls tuition payments. And I think that's a great way to frame it as a tuition payment. That's what it is. It's just learning. It's just the expense of expertise and experience and knowledge. And it's the cost of improvement. If you aren't making mistakes, then maybe you aren't pushing hard enough. So reframe it from this is bad, this is I can't get over this, I won't get over this, to okay, this is happening for me. I wish it wouldn't have. I'm not asking to make mistakes or have regret, but it happens. It's part of life. And what is the exact lesson I need to be learning? And what information and steps do I need to be applying into my life in order to improve moving forward? Be critical about that and analyze that. When you answer that, you'll be fine. Oh man, this one's a bad one. Jussie Kinsella? Man, I'm going to butcher a lot of these today. He says, do I think that the U.S. is marching towards a civil war? You know, I think we have ebbs and flows. I think we have highs and lows, and anytime we're in an election year and an election cycle, it's going to be more contentious and more polarizing than it otherwise is. It's my hope that as the elections wind down, that we begin to rally around some common ideals and common objectives. I believe most people, the overwhelming majority of the citizens of the United States, are interested in very much the same thing. How we get there might be a little bit differently, but generally we want a little money in the bank account. We want to experience some romance, have some connections with our children and friends, go on some adventures, have vacations, and find meaningful work and employment and feel valued. I think generally people all want that. So is the U.S. marching towards a civil war? If we continue to polarize ourselves and we continue to be pitted against each other by the media and by the powers that would be, then yeah, it's hard for me to envision a scenario where we don't continue to bicker and with each other and complain and point fingers and paint the other side as the enemy. So I hope we're able to turn this around. I hope we're able to go back to the intent that our founding fathers had. And look, I realize that we haven't always lived up to the ideals that our founding fathers painted for us in our founding documents. Of course, we've fallen short in many ways of that. But the documents that this country was founded on led the way for equality, led the way for prosperity, for freedom and liberty and independence. And it's hard to imagine going back several hundred years, almost 250 years now, and thinking that what we believe about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was not common practice. We take that for granted because we didn't have to experience a time where that wasn't the case. And this is why you hear from so many immigrants who come into the United States legally and go through the process and system. Bedros Koulian is a great example. He's been on the podcast a couple of times, and countless others. I just use his story because I know him, who don't take for granted the experience and the opportunities that are created in this country. So I hope we don't move towards a civil war. But when you have people who are fundamentally different, that the foundations, we can't even agree upon the foundational elements of our American way of life, that's very difficult for us to get along. I had a great conversation with a member of the Iron Council, and we had a disagreement, and it was respectful and it was civil, and that's fine. We need to have these important conversations. We were talking about the word patriarch and the meaning and the significance about patriarch and patriarchy. Well, we went back and forth and we're having this discussion, and it came down to the conclusion that we actually had defined the word patriarch differently. Well, yeah, if you aren't in agreement about some of the foundational elements of what we're talking about, then it's hard to come to any sort of mutual conclusion. And I feel like that's what we're experiencing right now. You've got the right and you've got the left, and you've got ends of the extreme on both sides. And it's not even that we foundationally want the same things. That's the problem, is that we're so far apart and so foundationally different that it's hard to imagine a situation where we don't move into some sort of either civil war or splitting or branching apart of this great American country. Talked at length about what we need to do about it, and you can go back and search the archives and find that. All right, Lonnie McIntyre, how can we as men be the catalyst that brings change in our communities, specifically dealing with things like race, fatherlessness, and poverty? Look, I think the best thing that you can do, well, number one, lead yourself. All right, let's get that out of the way. You have to lead yourself first, because if you don't lead yourself financially, with your fitness, with your business, with your the relationships you have in your home, if you're not leading yourself, then it's not even possible for you to turn around, extend a hand, and be available and present in the communities in which you serve. I mean, I've been there. There's been times in my life where I've been broke and I've been so consumed with my own problems and my own baggage that helping other people wasn't even on my radar. So it's critically important that you implement what we've been talking about over almost 6 years now, and become strong, become financially independent, reclaim some of that sovereignty. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and read the book, Sovereignty, the Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. It's very, very important that we do that, because the better you take care of yourself, the more room and capacity you have to serve others. So where do we start? You start with your family. You start with your wife, you start with your children, then you start with or move on to your extended family. Then where do we move from there? Now you start coaching sports teams. You get involved in city council and in politics. And this is where you can make the most difference. Grassroots movement at the local level, and start influencing the men in your community and start influencing the young men in your community. So get involved. Look, if you were, I know it's a little difficult now in the wake of this COVID thing, but at any other point, if you were to go to your community center in your city and say, hey, I want to volunteer to help coach basketball or baseball or football or track or whatever the thing is, they would be ecstatic about that. Because in my experience, men aren't doing that. There's fewer and fewer men who are able to step into that calling and to step into that role. So Lonnie, I commend you for even asking the question. How do you do it? Start with yourself, branch out to your immediate family, branch out to your extended family, then start serving on youth sports teams, Big Brothers Big Sister programs, city council, local political offices, and start influencing and enlisting the help of other men who can help you do the same. And by the way, if you're looking for material to use when it comes to coaching, teaching, mentoring, influencing other men, I mean, get 10 guys together and have a pickup league of basketball. And I know that you might say, well, how's that like helping the community? Well, it is, because you guys are going to start sharing ideas even between breaks as you're playing basketball. And then if you're looking for information as an outline or a guide on what to use, just listen to our podcast each week. Listen to the Friday Field Notes, in fact, and just make that your weekly talking point and discuss ideas and the pros and cons and what you agree with and what you don't agree with, and just hash these conversations out. It's very, very powerful stuff. All right, Andy Pacert. Again, I'm going to butcher these names, guys. I'm sorry. What are some tools that you use to conquer the fear of failing before starting something new? Look, this isn't an issue that I've ever run into, guys. I mean, it really isn't. Of course, I get fear. I'm not saying that I'm not afraid when I start things that are new. Even when I hit record on a podcast, it's not to the point that I'm paralyzed. It's like, okay, I want to do a good job. And fear means that you care, right? If you weren't afraid, then you just don't care about it. So just the fact that you are afraid says that you care, that this is important to you. So that's actually a good thing. But look, I don't have any tools to conquer the fear. I think sometimes we look at that and think, man, if I just had the right tool or the right phrase or the right terminology or the right system in place, then I could just start something new. No, Andy, really the answer is, and I hate to just take what could appear to be a cop-out, the answer is you just do it. You just acknowledge the fear. Yes, I'm afraid of doing this thing, to starting this business, growing this venture, asking this woman on a date, like whatever you're afraid of. I don't know what it is. You just force yourself to do it. That's it. There's no tool that's going to help you get over your fear. The only way you're going to get over your fear is by starting, by initiating, and then proving to yourself that you are capable. Now, I will say one strategy that you might be able to use is drawing upon past experiences where you have tried something new and it's gone very well for you. Well, now you have a track record, right? You've proven to yourself that you're capable of starting something, seeing something through, stepping into fear with a level of courage, and accomplishing what it is you've set out to accomplish. I would also say, so now I guess I am giving you some tools here. I would also say find and develop relationships with other men who have gone before you. So if you want to start a business venture, say you want to start an online clothing store or something. Okay, well, find other men who have done it, develop relationships, go to conferences, buy courses, look at emails, listen to podcasts about how to do it. And that's going to give you the fuel, the motivation, and the inspiration, and also the knowledge. You need the knowledge to be able to step into this thing that you're after. So look at your past, find examples where you've done it before in other contexts, and then look for people who have done what it is you're wanting to do and do what they do. Learn from them. All right, let's move on. Austin Hart. I'm 35. I'm realizing that I need to learn way more about budgeting and my finances. What would you recommend as far as doing better and some tips on how to stay disciplined? I would, if you're talking about budgeting specifically, I would look at Dave Ramsey's stuff. He's got some great information, Total Money Makeover. It's one of the best. I'm sure, I don't know this 100%, but I'm sure it's one of the best financial selling books of all time, Total Money Makeover. He goes into depth into budgeting, paying off debt, how to be disciplined, including, I believe it's called the envelope system. The debt snowball is another strategy he uses for paying off debt. So if you're at the foundational levels of your finances, I'm not talking about investing in collectibles or high risk portfolios. I'm talking about the foundational elements of budgeting, paying off debt, that sort of thing. Dave Ramsey's got some great and valuable information there. So check that out. I want to bring this question up because I think there's a great learning experience here. There's a good teaching moment in this next question. So Andre Burkenya says, what would you suggest to anyone who is willing to develop a men's group/community? So I'm going to answer that question, but first, here's one thing I do need to say. Guys, I heard a quote a long time ago, and it's turned out to be true in my life. And the quote is this: the quality of your life will be determined by the quality of question that you ask. Now, this is a noble question because Andre is interested in developing a men's group and community. So it's a noble question. It's just not a powerful question. And let me explain the difference. His heart is in the right place. The intentions are good. He wants to develop a men's group and community. Those are good intentions. But if it's such a broad question that it's hard for me to know exactly what he's looking for. So I could come up with a dozen different responses to this question and still not hit the target because it's so broad. So gentlemen, when you're asking questions, and this actually goes back to Andy when he was asking about what tools do I use to conquer fear before I start, and I said, go find somebody who's doing it. Don't just ask them, what have they done? Get specific. Like, what is the first step that I need to take? What is the next step? Okay, I'm having struggles in having guys attend. Have you ever run into any attendance issues or had guys be all hopped up for a week and then ghost you? Like, these are the types of things that you want to ask. They're very specific. They're very poignant. They're very pointed. And you're going to get better answers because you're leading what you're looking for instead of just saying, hey, what do you think I should do? This is kind of like, how do I improve myself? I could tell you an infinite number of things and all of them may not apply. So get more specific, and I think that'll really help. Okay, but let me attempt to answer the question anyways. Number one, have a framework. You don't have to have everything laid out when it comes to developing a men's group and community. You don't have to have it all laid out, but have a framework. If it's so loose and so scattered, and this goes back to the point about questions, if it's so broad, it's not very enticing. So have a specific pointed framework, and maybe you address 3 to 4 to 5 things. We did 8 things initially. You can go back and watch my early YouTube videos, and you can see, I think it was called 8 skill sets every man needs to master. It was okay, but it wasn't complete. It wasn't very well thought out, but it was something. And now we evolve and we grow and we expand and we improve and we tweak and we eliminate and we adjust and we do all those things as we go. But you got to start with some sort of framework, some sort of an agenda. Then from there, it's just a matter of inviting people. You invite the 2 or 3 or 5 guys that you know that are in your circle, that you want to be in your circle, and you say, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. Care to join me? And here's the most important part, especially as you're launching. Whether this is a local men's community or you guys are trying to do something online similar to what we've done here with Order of Man, please hear me on this. You have to be hyper consistent. Because if you're not, people are going to bail. Right? Like if they're more consistent or more interested than you are, they're going to bail. And if you're only doing it based on the positive encouragement and feedback that you get, you're going to fail very, very early because people just aren't going to be there. And it's going to take you doing it over and over and over and over and showing up every single week, even if nobody else shows up, whether that's in person or online. And then you'll notice, okay, we've got a core group of 3 to 5 guys here. We're showing up consistently, and you just keep the ball rolling. Don't let the ball stop. Because if it does stop, it's going to be harder for you to actually pick up the momentum and start going again. So be very, very consistent, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly, whatever that looks like. Be very, very consistent. Have an agenda. Invite the people you know. Encourage them to invite the men they know. And just be consistent. Keep working, refining your message and what you guys are talking about. It's not easy. It's not easy. That's why I hear from guys every single day. Hey, Ryan, I'm starting an organization like yours, or I want to start a podcast that focuses on men, or I want to help Christian men in my community, or I want everyday messages. And I commend them, but I know that 95 to 99% of them are just not going to make it because they're not willing to be consistent. They're willing to do it for like a month or two and see how it goes. Well, that's not going to fly. When I started the Order of Man podcast, I remember vividly sitting down with a friend of mine. We were talking about the podcast and the idea because he was a podcaster himself and did some coaching. And I told him, again, vividly, I remember like it was yesterday. I said, I'm not going to make a decision as to whether or not I continue with Order of Man or I throw in the towel for 2 years. So I did this for 2 years before I even considered whether or not I would throw in the towel. Now, I knew that I wouldn't well before 2 years. But that's how committed I was to it. And in the past 5.5 years now, about 5.5 years, I have not missed a single podcast episode. Not one. That's probably over at this point 500 to 600 podcasts. And I have not missed a single podcast episode. On top of everything else that we're doing, our meetings and our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council, and our programs and our courses and the store, like I don't miss those things. I'm hyper consistent. So Ryan, oh man, you've had so much success. How do you make this work? Or people will compliment me and say, you can present this stuff so well. Yeah, well, I would hope. I mean, I've been doing it every single day for nearly 6 years now. So when people say, oh, you're a natural. No, I'm not a natural at any of this. Go back and watch my first YouTube video. In fact, don't go back and watch my first YouTube video. Go back and listen to the first podcast. And you'll see that, okay, I'm not a natural by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. I've just been doing it long enough that I'm starting to get better at it. Andre, I hope that helps. Douglas Farnsworth, excuse me. He says, I'm 36. I have a skill making ice carvings, which is a really cool skill, actually. He says, I wanted to start my own biz, but COVID jacked that up. I also wanted to be an LEO, firefighter, or work in the medical field. I currently find myself working at trying to get into all. That's part of the problem, I bet. It drives my wife nuts as she wants me to pick one thing and work towards it. She's right. I can't decide. I kind of want to see where I fall, I guess. Look, I'm giving you some commentary in here. I kind of want to see where I fall. Man, it's a really passive way to live life, but let's keep going. My question is, should I stick to one direction? Should I be worried that I'm 36 and can't decide? Thanks. Podcast has been a great deal of support. All right, Douglas, let's break this down, man, because we got a lot to unpack here. I want to answer your question, should I be worried that I'm 36 and can't decide? All right, don't get locked in your head, because that's where you're at right now. Oh, man, I'm 36. I'm getting older. I can't decide. Is that a problem? What do people think of me? You're starting to get wrapped up in your headspace. And that's a problem because you won't do anything. You'll paralyze and cripple yourself. I mean, really, the alternative is to do nothing or to maintain your current course of action, whatever that is, and then be asking me or somebody else in 20 years at 56, oh, should I be worried? I'm 56 now. Should I be worried? Okay, so you're going to be asking that question forever until you actually decide. And how do you decide? You just pick one. Just pick one. What sounds right? Firefighting. Good. Pick that course of action and go for it. Now look, there's nothing to say that at some point you can't pivot, but you sound like you have a little bit of a wishy-washiness, like, oh, what could be, and oh, I don't know. You're getting paralyzed here because you're in your own head. So pick one and dive into it. Because if you're trying to be an LEO, a firefighter, work in the medical field and do ice carvings, if you're trying to do all of that, you're going to suck at all of it. It's not like you're opening options for yourself because you're doing 5 or 6 or 10 things. You're actually limiting yourself because you're not giving yourself the space, the margin, the time, the commitment, the energy, the resources that is required to become a firefighter at 36 or to work in the medical field or to build an ice carvings business. So pick one. I agree with your wife. It's frustrating to her because you can't decide. So how do you do it? You pick one. And you say, I'm going to go down this route and I'm going to really see where it takes me. I'm going to take the first step, then the next step, then the next step, then the next step. So Douglas, I wish I had a better answer for you, but honestly, the best answer and the only answer is pick one and go all in. Dive in head first, commit all your time, energy, resources to that thing. And then when you get your feet under you, let's say you go the fighter path and you start to get your feet under you a little bit. Okay, well, maybe you have some time or some margin and space now to do some ice carvings on the weekends. Cool. You can do that. But for now, you got to pick one and you got to get going. And you're not getting any younger. And I don't want you to be asking this same question when you're 45, 55, 65, or dead. Just get going. All right. Next. Again, we're running into the same issue here. Jason Kimball, what other than Order of Man would you call as good resources for the change that we need to see in the world? There's an infinite number of resources. For what? For what specifically? When you can answer that question, then I can give you some resources. Because I could share a million different websites, a million different podcasts, and I might hit the mark and I might not. So what change we need to see in the world? Like what specifically? This actually gets into Douglas's question too, guys. Is like, okay, well, what specifically do you want to change? Do you want to change the obesity epidemic? Do you want to change the epidemic of fatherless homes? Do you want to fight for Second Amendment rights? Do you want to join the military? Do you want to serve abroad? Like what change are you talking about? Get specific, and then you'll be able to have a path for finding the answers that you desire. And by the way, it's not your obligation, responsibility, or even opportunity to solve all of the world's problems. Specialize. Like I'm not necessarily fighting deep into the obesity epidemic or even the human trafficking epidemic. Now, those are things that we touch on. I certainly have conversations that deal with those things because it's part of the package. But there's other people who are hyper-focused. Tim Ballard with Operation Underground Railroad. Okay, he's all in on that. And that's great. I can then use Tim's organization and him and his resources to tap into it, but that's not what I'm personally doing. Okay, and that sounds bad because we want to solve all the problems. I get it. Again, noble, not possible. So Jason, I would say I'll give you an answer if you tell me what specific change you're referring to. All right, Keith Daher. Ways to connect more with your daughter. She's turning 13 soon. You just connect with her. Find out what she's interested and do that. If she likes animals, if she likes whatever, I don't know, whatever her thing is. If she likes reading, if she likes whatever. I don't know your daughter. I know my daughter. I know what she's interested in because we spend time and we have conversations and we talk and we laugh and we play together. So the best way to connect with your daughter is to find whatever she's interested in, not what you're interested in, whatever she's interested in, and then make a commitment to doing that every week or every couple of days with her. There's another great book called The Family Board Meeting that you should definitely check out. It's a very, very quick read. And I am drawing a blank on the author's name right now. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I don't know. Anyways, Family Board Meeting. Check it out. I think that's going to give you some great resources and a framework for how to connect well with your daughter. It's a very good read. His name escapes me, which is sad and maybe insulting. I feel bad about that. Ryan Shank. What are good books people to listen to for investing? A Financial Advisor is great. A Random Walk Down Wall Street. I mean, there's all kinds of books. A Random Walk Down Wall Street. Jeff Rose, Good Financial Sense. Joe Saul-Sehy with Stacking Benjamins. Those are both podcasts and resources. I'm not a Dave Ramsey fan when it comes to investing. I think he's got a lot of misguided at best advice that doesn't really apply or work. So I would avoid that. But yeah, there's a couple of resources for you. Just type in finances into your Bigger Pockets podcast. That's for real estate investing. In fact, Brandon's going to be coming on the podcast here before too long. So there's a couple of resources for you. Okay, let me skip ahead. I see a couple of questions. I'm just going to skip here real quick because I want to get to the best ones. Bear with me, guys. Okay, here's one. Jay Lutsky. How can one keep themselves mentally healthy during these times? By doing the same things you were doing before. Now, you've got to pivot a little bit. I realize that. I understand that you don't have the same systems, you don't have the same patterns and routines, but you can still do the same activities. For example, if you were driving to the gym every day and that was keeping you sane, then do that at home. Maybe your gym is shut down. There's something that prevents you from going there. The schedule has changed. You can't make it work. Well, okay, adapt. How do you bring that same level of fitness and working out into your home? Do that. Find things that are engaging to you. Don't let go of your hobbies. Stay maintained and engaged in those hobbies and activities. Have a goal. Have a plan. We have a Battle Ready course that's available. It's a free email course. You can check it out. It's at orderofman.com/battleready, and it'll actually help you make a plan. I know for me, my sanity is that much more improved when I have something that I'm actively working towards. If I don't have something I'm actively working towards, I feel scatterbrained. I feel ineffective, inefficient. It bothers me. It messes with my emotions. It gets me in my headspace. I don't want to be there. I want to be actively engaged towards working towards solutions to problems, even if they're my own goals and objectives. So you can check that out, orderofman.com/battleready. All right. Chris Fisher, what are some lessons that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has taught you? Number one is that I'm not as capable as I thought I was. That's certainly one. You know, I've always prided myself on being strong and fit and capable, and then you get to jiu-jitsu and you realize you've got, you know, a guy that's 50 pounds lighter than you and he's running circles around you. That's tough to deal with. Also patience, because you're not going to be as good as you want to be or even expect yourself to be initially. So just being patient, trusting the process, continuing to show up, being consistent like I was talking about earlier, and just knowing that if you put in the mat time and you get the right training and you're rolling with good partners, then things are going to start to develop and you're going to get better at not only jiu-jitsu, but at life. And that's the beauty for me of jiu-jitsu, is that it translates perfectly over into the way I run my business and the way that I adapt. I used to be, hey, I'm going to force this square peg into a round hole. And now I realize with some help from jiu-jitsu that you can't approach every challenge the exact same way. If you do, you're going to get yourself in a compromising position. So you survey the landscape, you take into consideration what other factors could derail you, and then you make a plan and you work your plan. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you adapt quickly. You keep yourself calm. That's important. So, man, there are just so many lessons that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has taught me over the past year, but those are a handful of them. Craig Cottrell says, what does manhood in the U.S. look like in 5 years? Well, you know, I think it's going to continue to go down a path. Look, what we're going to see is we're going to see a widening. We're going to see a greater disparity between those males who have continued to be taught by women. They've been raised in fatherless homes. They've been indoctrinated by the school system. They've bought into the belief that it's okay and encouraged to be weak or to be feminine. And I'm not saying femininity is weak, by the way. So let me just throw that disclaimer out there. It's different. It's a different kind of strength, but we can talk about that now or later. So you're going to continue to see males go down that path, because what will change, right? But then you're also going to have other males who recognize that this is an issue. They see that it's a problem. I just read a tweet from the UN, the United Nations, that said, and I'm paraphrasing, but not much, that a male-dominated society and a male-dominated culture is and has been dangerous to women, girls, men, and boys. So we have organizations like this perpetuating the idea, the myth, that somehow men are destructive and damaging just by their very nature. So you're going to see a lot of people buy into that. And it's going to create problems, real problems, financially, emotionally, with our overall safety, with our prosperity. It's going to create problems. And then you're going to have on the other end of the spectrum men who recognize that's a problem, and they're going to attempt to make themselves more capable, more prepared, better off financially, in better physical health, that's the side of the spectrum I want to be on. That's what I'm working towards, and that's what I'm encouraging men to do and have been over the past 5 and 6 years. So you're going to have males. I want to make the distinction there. You're going to have males who don't buy into the idea that masculinity, it's not even an idea, it just is, that they don't buy into masculinity being good and virtuous and strong and capable, and instead decide to reject masculinity altogether. So it's going to widen. Those people are going to be hurt and damaged by it, and they're either going to put themselves into a corner or they're going to realize the error of their ways and fix themselves. It's kind of like that, what is it? Good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. You guys all know the adage. Well, that's what's happening right now. So you can either get out ahead of the curve and recognize that, we don't really actually have it that bad yet. We actually have it really good. Yes, there's some issues that we need to deal with societally, but we actually have it pretty good. But it's only going to get worse if we don't do anything about it. And we continue to live in this just weak, pathetic, immediate gratification state that we're trying to foster in people right now. It's not going to work. And it's going to create a lot of pain. Unless enough of us can get on the path and do what it is we need to do. So when Craig says, what does manhood look like? I'm not going to predict what it's going to look like. I'm just going to say there's men who are going to go further down one path than the other, and the ones that go down the right path, which is stepping fully into masculinity and manliness, are going to do well by themselves and their families and their communities. Those that don't step into it and allow themselves to be feminized and strip away all their masculine virtues are going to put themselves and the people around them in compromising positions. Jacob Winters. Questions like these I get quite a bit. The mother of my kids is trying to move her and my children to another state. The city she lives in was destroyed by Hurricane Laura, and she's wanting to relocate for quote-unquote better opportunities. While I agree there's more opportunities there, I don't want my kids 4 hours from me. She says I'm trying to hold them back. Am I wrong for telling her no? I don't know if you're wrong. Honestly, I don't know if you're wrong or you're right. I mean, I certainly understand you wanting to be closer to your children. I get that. I'm just trying to look at this from both aisles. Like my gut and my emotions say, yeah, you're dead on. Like she shouldn't be taking them 4 hours away. But then also that might actually present better opportunities for her, considering the city that she lives in currently was destroyed by this hurricane. And it might present better opportunities for your children. I don't know, man. I don't know enough about your situation and the scenario to tell you that you're right or wrong. I think you certainly want to be by your kids, and that's a good thing. But I might look for other opportunities here for you, maybe to move closer to them, or work closer with your kids' mother to attempt to come to some sort of mutual conclusion. I hate hearing these things where women take kids to other states, but you made a decision and so did she. And you have to deal with those decisions, as difficult as they can be. It's hard for me to say, well, she shouldn't be able to leave, but it's also hard for me to say she should have to stay forever because you guys decided to make a decision and it wasn't, conducive to being as involved with your children. So, now, do you have the right to say no and to keep her there? I actually don't know the answer to that. I would say you talk with your lawyer. If you don't have one, then consider getting one, because I think it is important that fathers protect their rights to be able to see their children, to be able to spend time with their kids. And again, I don't know all the ramifications of your relationship, so you need to talk with your attorney and see what the legal ramifications of this are. But that's my 2 cents. I'm trying to be level-headed in that response, because it's very easy for me to say, no, hell no, like keep her here. But there's considerations that need to be considered. Here's another, again, I'm just reiterating the general questions, like how to deal with blood relative / wife conflict. Too general. It's difficult for me to answer that question. Here's an interesting one. Bo Dobbs. My soon-to-be wife has 2 daughters that recently told her they think they are bisexual. How do I parent them and support her while guiding them to Christ's path? You know, I think obviously you're in this relationship. You're going to be marrying this woman, so it is what it currently is. You know, and I think that you can support them. I think you can be a great man. I think you can show them the power of having a great father in the home. I don't know how old her daughters are, if they're young and they're experimenting or it's cool. And so they think, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. Or, you know, they really are. I don't know. But I think you just be open and honest about your belief. And you better be open and honest about your beliefs with your soon-to-be wife now. Because if you hide it and you don't want to create waves or ripples or any animosity or contention, man, if you don't talk about this now with her, your fiance, it's only going to get worse if you guys are not on the same page. So, you know, I think about that. If one of my children came to me and said, you know, they were gay, that's news that I wouldn't want to hear. And I know that's not popular. I know people are going to say, oh, you're homo. No. That's not what it is at all. I just think they're going to live a better life generally if they're straight. So if one of my children came to me and said, well, I'm gay, I can't really envision me raising them any differently. We'd still go to church. We'd still talk about the path of discipline and being good and doing the right things and making yourself more capable. I don't know that it would change for me. And I don't know why it would need to change. So you keep walking your path. Have the conversation with your wife, and it's not going to be probably just one. It's probably going to be multiple conversations, and figure out if you guys are on the same page about how you want to address this. Because if you're not, man, that's a big red flag that better be addressed now. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse. Please hear me on that. It's only going to get worse if you don't address it. All right, here we go. What is it that you consider order of man to be at its primary core? To build, strengthen, or teach? All. It's to build up men to become more capable fathers, husbands, business owners, community leaders. How do we do that? By teaching them what has worked, not only for me, but thousands and thousands of men throughout all of history, and then to give them the tools and the resources and conversations that they need to strengthen their resolve to step into the calling of man. I don't think it has to be to build, strengthen, or teach. I don't think it has to be any of those. Our goal is to build an army of men. So I used your adjective here, your build, right? To build an army of men who want to step into those callings, who want to protect, want to provide, and want to preside. That is my core mission. And so we have different ways and strategies and ideals and different processes to go about doing that. But ultimately, that's the goal. That's the objective. I hope I answered that. I'm going to skip that one. Okay, here's an interesting one. And I've talked about this before, okay? Have you ever considered bringing on a quote-unquote average Joe on your podcast? I've talked about this. Someone who isn't well known by everyone. The answer is yes, I'd consider it, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to bring on what you're calling an average Joe, okay? And by the way, let me tell you, all the guys that I've had on the podcast, the high-profile guys from David Goggins. I mean, go back and listen to David Goggins' story. He's an average Joe by its very definition. He was fat. He was overweight. He was out of shape. He just didn't have any goals or direction or ambition in his life. Very much the same as all of us have dealt with at some point or are currently dealing with in our lives. And he changed it around. So why would I want to have a guy on the podcast who hasn't changed around? Oh, but Ryan, I don't resonate with these guys. Well, yeah, that's the point. You don't resonate with them. Because if you did resonate with them fully, you'd already be doing what they're doing. So this is an aspirational podcast. This is not a complacent or mediocre podcast. Hey, I just want to hear guys I'm comfortable with. Because that's really what's happening here. People will say, I don't resonate with him. Well, you want to hear from people that make you comfortable. Why? Because it's easy. It's easier to feel better when you hear that somebody else is doing it or in the same problems you are. But that makes me feel better. Yes, I know. That's not the goal of the podcast or the movement. The goal is to look at men who are doing better, who are having better results, who are thriving and succeeding on big levels, and then we work backwards into what they did. I'm taking David Goggins here as an example. What did he do in order to get him into that position? Because at one point, he was a quote-unquote average Joe. I don't understand why I'd want to hear from a quote-unquote average Joe who hasn't figured it out yet. I can't learn anything from that individual. I wouldn't take fitness advice from a guy that's 300 pounds overweight. Okay, I'm not going to take financial advice from a guy who can't even make his mortgage payment. Brian, how could you say that? That's mean. I don't care what it is. If I want to thrive and I want to excel and I want to succeed, then I need to find men who are doing better than I. And if you can't resonate with them, that's your fault. Start resonating with them by doing what they're doing. Every podcast we have, we're extracting their knowledge and their wisdom and their expertise and their experience. And if you just implement what they do, whether you resonate or not, you just implement their teachings, you're going to get that much closer to them. So please, guys, stop. Can we just have an average Joe on the podcast? No. If you want an average Joe on the podcast, go talk with your brother-in-law. Go talk with your coworker. Go talk with somebody in your current circle. I'm not going to miss a powerful opportunity through this podcast to talk with guys who haven't figured the game out yet. I'm going to talk with hard chargers, guys with ambition, guys with success on multiple different fronts, and learn from them. That's what I'm going to do. Now, that said, I am going to try to attempt to take them from where they currently are and work them backwards so they can talk about the times when they are average Joes. I don't even like that term. I'm just using that because that's the term you're using here. So I'm going to go back and then we're going to work through how they improve themselves. But no, we're not having guys who haven't figured it out on the podcast. It's not something we're going to be doing. Okay? All right. Let's see. Bradley Chandler. How are we doing on time here? Go for another 15 minutes or so. Bradley Chandler says, Ryan, I see many other men on this post talking about money, finances during COVID. As a certified financial people, I talk to people all the time. Could it be helpful to give some advice on how to set yourself up for loss of income or unexpected expenses? Yeah, we've talked about that in the past. In fact, I've got a couple of podcasts coming up where we're going to actually talk about specifically how to deal with financial issues, especially as, like you said, Bradley, unexpected events come up. So definitely important. Okay. Let me see what else we got here. How did you win your wife back when you were separated? I've got plenty of podcasts and conversations, including the conversations I've had with her. I've actually had her on the podcast 3 or 4 times. Go back and listen to those ones. They are very, very good. Let's see. How did you pick your homeschool curriculum? A lot of people are homeschooling right now, guys. We've homeschooled. This will be our 2nd year. So we started last year when we moved here to Maine. And this was before the whole COVID thing. And so we're kind of ahead of the curve just a little bit, slightly. But yeah, we just did some research. We found what we liked and what sounded good and what tied into our beliefs and philosophies and how we wanted to teach and what we wanted our children to learn. And we rolled with it. And it's been good. We've made some adjustments along the way. Look, I've told you guys, I'm not an analytical person. I'm an intuitive person. So when I see something, I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. I do it. And if it's good, I keep doing it. If it isn't, I adjust. So that's the elements of research that we did. We use a program called The Good and the Beautiful. Kind of sounds like an old soap opera I used to have to watch when my grandma would. But it's called The Good and Beautiful. And it's been a great curriculum. Now we've supplemented with other little things as we've seen needs arise. One of my children it appears is dyslexic. So we're going to have to incorporate some different learning into their curriculum. But, you just piece it together and you're the parent. You know your kids better. You know your kids better than a teacher would. And hey, bless those teachers' hearts. They've got 25, 30, 40, 50 kids. Yeah, you're going to know your 2 to 3 to 4 kids better than they know their 30 that they deal with. And you're going to have more influence. So you're going to be able to cater a learning curriculum better than a teacher would. Some people say, well, teachers are professionals. Right, but you're a parent. So it's kind of your job. Okay, so if you don't feel good about it, like teaching your kids, then learn, because that's what parenthood is. It's trial and error. It's learning as you go, figuring it out. That didn't work. That did work. Tweak this, adjust this, get better at this, structure this discipline. Oh, this child needs to be disciplined this way, and this child needs to be disciplined that way. So I think we ought to be careful of outsourcing the entire education or learning process to the quote unquote professionals. And they are. Look, I know that teachers do wonderful things, but I have friends who are teachers who are so bogged down with red tape and paperwork and trying to meet this demand or Common Core and some of these other programs, and it's just stripped away any ability for them to effectively teach these children the way they know how to and the way they have a desire to. So there you go. Let's find another one here. Eric Kovic says, have either of you, and he's talking about Kip, unfortunately you don't get Kip today, you just get me, so for better or worse, but have either of you struggled with a lack of mental toughness? If so, what steps did you take to build that up? You know, I actually don't think I've ever really dealt with mental toughness issues. I've certainly dealt with complacency. I've certainly dealt with laziness and just settling into the current results, whether they were underperformance or even now we're at the level that I desire. Sometimes it's hard for me to continue to push when we have enjoyed some mild success. So that is something that I slip into quite often. But as far as mental toughness, you know, it just isn't something that I've dealt with. Like I've always been the kind of guy where if I have this thing or this thought in my mind, I just make it work and I just put my head down. I'm sure some of it is just in my nature, just like it is for some of you guys. And I'm sure some of it is nurture. Being around the right people is very important. Having the right systems is very important. Also knowing yourself, Eric. Knowing yourself. Knowing what drives you, what motivates you, what inspires you, what derails you, what temptations you have. You need to be very honest and do a very critical assessment of how you perform. And some people won't do this. A lot of men actually won't do this because they're worried that it'll point out some vulnerabilities or flaws in who they are. And it will. If you're doing this assessment the right way, you will actually point out where you're falling short and where you're inadequate. But I would rather know that so that I can improve it than bury my head in the sand like an ostrich and not see it, but then get kicked in the balls by whatever life has to throw at you. I want to know ahead of time so I can adjust accordingly. So while some people want to remain ignorant about their underperformance, I want to be very aware of that so I can fix it. So I hope that gives you at least some ideas. Find the right people, surround yourself with the right people, have the right systems, and know yourself. All right, let's take a few more. Are the daily tasks for the battle planner things for that specific week or just that day? So I don't have it right here. It's over here on my other desk. But a lot of you guys have seen the 12-week battle planner. You can go to the store and check it out and just type in battle planner. A couple of different planners will come up, but you'll see it. As a component of the battle planner, there's the daily tasks, which will be on the bottom left of that planner in the store. And what I do is the night before, I go in there and write the tasks that I need to get done for the next day. So it might be 5, it might be 10, it might be 20, whatever it is. And typically what happens, Dwayne, on this, is that I'll get if there's 10 things, let's say, I'll get 5 or 6 of them done today. I fully realize that I probably won't get all 10 or whatever it is 100% today. And I'm okay with that. Because what I do is I go and say, okay, what's the most important thing? This is. Then when that's done, what's the next most important thing? The next most important thing, and so on down the list. So let's say I get 5 or 6 done. Well, then what I do is I just roll it over to the next day. The 12-week battle planner it's broken up in a weekly segment. So they're just going to be on there. It says daily tasks, but it's for the entire week. So I get the 6 done, cross them off, then I got the 4 remaining. Well, in the next 24 hours, something else is probably going to come up. So I've got the 4 that rolled over from Monday to Tuesday. And then today I've got another 4 things. So now it's 8. And then today I get 4 of the 8 done. Now another 4 roll over, and you got to pick up 5 new tasks I need to do. So it's kind of like a rolling daily task, and I can see, and it's valuable for me. This goes back to the question that Eric was asking about mental toughness and knowing yourself. It's valuable to know what drives you, what motivates you. And when I see a list of 10 things and I literally put a checkbox by 6 of them, I feel good knowing that I got 60% done. And I also am hopeful and excited about getting the other 4 done. So this is how I've worked best, and this is why I put the battle planner together like that. So that's a great question. It is for that day, but I realize I'm not going to get it all done, and so I just roll it to the next day, and I do that rolling process every single evening, guys. It doesn't start in the morning. It starts in the evening, the night before. So the night before, I've got the 10 things. I'm like, cool, I got those 4 done, 6. Okay, when I get in tomorrow, I've got a podcast at 9, or I've got a podcast at this time, and I'm going to do this task first, then this task. So I prioritize that evening so that when I come in the next morning to my office, which happens to be in my house here, I can just get straight to it. I might do some reprioritization just based on new tasks that came up or new things I need to get done over the evening. But yeah, I can just jump right into it, and that's very, very valuable. Okay. What else? What else we got here? Okay, here's an interesting one. How can I be more open and talk about my emotions with other men? I don't have a group of men I can connect with to share what I'm feeling, and I feel like I need to find a group. How can I do this? There are some podcasts that I've done is How to Build a Band of Brothers. Stephen Mansfield has a great book titled How to Build a Band of Brothers that can walk you through this. But yeah, I think you've got to look to your immediate circle now. And this goes back to a previous question about a men's community in your area. Look to your current circle. Have a formula for what you guys want to do, whether that's playing sports or whether that's getting together and reading the Bible or doing a weekly get-together to discuss the Friday field notes from the previous week. So you have your formula, and then you just invite 1 or 2 guys. And you get that core group of guys, and now you start having them invite people. Talking about your feelings, I hear that, and I'm just telling you from my perspective. If you came to me and said, hey, Ryan, I want to build this community, and I'd love to have you be part of it, and where we talk about our feelings, that's not something I would be interested in. But I don't think it has to be catered towards how do we talk about our feelings. Like, this isn't sitting around the campfire holding hands and singing Kumbaya, right? This is, let's do something. Let's play sports or have some sort of like common objective that we can work towards. And what you'll find, Marty, is that you'll find by having that common objective or that purpose, you will be able to have some of these meaningful discussions about your life and what you're experiencing. But I would not build it around, hey, I just want to connect with guys so we can share our feelings. I know there's going to be guys who may be interested in that, but the overwhelming majority of us are not going to be interested in that. We just want to go to the shooting range. Oh, and by the way, we'll talk about some of these things while we're doing these activities. Okay? I hope that helps. Gary Gray says, how have each of you changed for the better over the past 5 years of operating Order of Man? What have you learned about yourselves? I like this question because I'm actually feeling pretty good over the past, I would say even several months, more so than I have at any other point in my life. I feel confident. I feel bold. I feel inspired. I feel motivated. I've got the systems in place that allow me to thrive and succeed. And, sometimes I'm up and down with my health goals or some other ambitions and things that I have, but primarily it continues to grow. If we scan out, the curve is on an accelerated exponential growth curve for me. Financially, spiritually, with my fitness, the relationship I have with my wife, the business, all of that stuff. I'm just more confident. I'm more confident because I do have a purpose. I do have a goal. And people will say, well, how do you find your purpose? That's not a great question, and I'll tell you why. It's too passive. How do you find your purpose? It's too passive. It's like one day you're walking in the woods and you trip over a rock and there it is. There's your purpose. It doesn't work like that, guys. So I choose not to use the language of finding your purpose. Instead, I would say, how do you develop a sense of meaning in your life? This goes back to the question the gentleman earlier was asking about, which path do I choose? Firefighting, LEO, medical, ice carvings. It's about developing meaningful work in your life. And that's what we've done here with Order of Man. When I started, I had no idea that this would grow into what it is today. I had no idea I'd have the conversations with the men I have. I'd have no idea that we'd be reaching hundreds of thousands, if not millions of men across the planet, quite literally. I had no idea. All I knew is that I was interested in it. And I took a step, and it worked. And I took another step, and that worked. And I took another step, and maybe that one didn't quite totally work. But then I took another step, and that one did. And so the whole learning and growing process and proving that I'm capable and getting better in all ways in my life keeps me on the path and keeps me on the track. And so it's exciting. I'm definitely more, that's the number one takeaway is I'm more confident now than I have been at any other point in my life because I know why I'm here. I know what my goals are. I have a plan for achieving them, and I actively work towards it every single day. All right, let's take one or two more. Here's one that James Matthew King says, how to build assertive/aggressiveness if that isn't your natural inclination. And I actually like what Boomer Mueller says here. He says, do hard shit. That's a good suggestion, actually. Like, do something that scares you. Do something that's hard. And the more you do that, the more you prove to yourself that you're capable of doing it. I'd be careful about moving to aggressiveness, since you use that term, because this is what happens with a lot of quote-unquote nice guys. And by the way, guys, when I say nice guys, I'm not talking about kind. Okay, you're all capable of discernment and understanding context. Is it okay to be nice? Of course, but I consider that more kindness. When I say nice guy, what I'm talking about is the guy that gets railroaded. He doesn't share his ideas. He's very passive. He doesn't want any sort of confrontation. That's what I'm talking about when I say nice guy. Kindness is just being a kind person. You know, going to the post office and seeing that somebody has a bunch of, bags in their hands and opening the door for that individual. That would be a kind, respectful thing to do. That doesn't make you a nice guy. Okay, there's a difference. But what a lot of nice guys will do as they're trying to overcome their nice guyness is they'll go too far. They'll turn into dicks. They'll just be jerks to everybody because they think, okay, this is how I do it. And you know what? If you're a nice guy, you're gonna have that little pendulum swinging. So your idea is just not to move it too far, to move it just one step. And how do you do that? Boomer says, do things that are hard. Absolutely. Do things that are hard. Practice it. When somebody says, do you have an opinion? Practice sharing your opinion. When somebody says, where would you like to eat for lunch today? The nice guy will say, I don't care, wherever you want to go. Well, if you're trying to work towards being more assertive, then you should say, I'd really like to go to Olive Garden. I'd really like to go to this new Mexican food place that I haven't tried before. So you try it. Another very practical tip is asking for discounts. Wherever you go, just ask for a discount. It's going to be super uncomfortable, super awkward, especially if you're not used to being assertive. So you're at the store, and I've done this. In fact, we had an exercise like this in the Iron Council several months ago, if not years ago now at this point. And for the whole week or the whole month, I can't remember what we did, the goal was anytime you spent money, you asked for a discount. So if it was online, you sent an email and you said, hey, I'm buying this thing. Do you have any coupon codes or a discount? I remember one time specifically, I was at a clothing store, and I think I was buying some shoes. And we get up to the register, and they say, okay, it's $100 or whatever it was. And I said, do you have any discounts right now? And the guy was like, discounts for what? I said, discounts for the shoes. Like, do you have any sales going, or can you offer any discount for it? He's like, I don't know. I've never had anybody ask me that. I'm like, okay, well, so do you? And he's like, yeah, I think we can give you 10% off. And it's amazing how often it actually works if you just do it. And then you get better at being rejected, because I had some people say, no, we don't have any discounts. And you realize, oh, okay, well, it's not the end of the world, but you asked. So you can do these little practical exercises, practice saying no without giving a reason. So if somebody asks you to do something, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that. And that's it. Very, very difficult, deceivingly difficult to do. But you start doing these little things, you're going to get very, very good at being assertive. Just be careful not to swing the pendulum too far over into just being a jerk to everybody, because that's obviously not what you're trying to accomplish here. Okay? All right, this is the last question. Justin Messakar says, how has your child's education been changed these days, and how have you adjusted? Have you implemented more at-home education? Yeah, well, certainly I've implemented more at-home education because we've done homeschooling for the past 2 years. So yeah, I mean, they're at home learning, and it's better. It's more specific, it's more catered, it's more efficient. When we first started homeschooling, I remember my wife got done with schooling after 2 to 3 hours, and I thought, you can't be done. They didn't learn everything they needed to learn. And we had a long conversation about it, and actually they were getting everything they needed and more at home in a period of 2 to 3 hours than they were in the public school system. And this is not to bash on the school teachers. They're doing the best they can. But if you've got 25 or 30 kids or even more, and you have to operate under the No Child Left Behind, then I don't know how else to say it other than the school teacher is playing to the lowest common denominator. I know that's not a very humane necessarily way to say it because we're talking about a child's education, but that's the truth. That's the reality, is that the least intelligent child in the class is getting the attention and everybody else is having to play down to that level. And then on top of that, you have transitions between class times, and you have recess, and you have lunch, and you have assemblies, and you have announcements, and you have all of these little inefficient things throughout the day, and it turns what should take 2 to 3 hours into a 7-8 hour ordeal where the child is actually not learning to their own capabilities. So I really enjoy the fact that our children are homeschooled because they're getting more information, they're learning better, they're getting more attention. Just like I told you with one of my children who has dyslexia, we think they're going to get more catered approach, an individual, unique approach to ensure that we address that issue. So it's better on every metric. The only metric it's not better on, I will say this caveat, is the social element, of course, right? So we have friends over. We have men that come here for our events, so my children get to interact with adults, which I like. I want my children interacting with adults because at some point they will be adults. But we have neighbors and friends, and my kids are involved in sports, and they go to CrossFit. And so there's other opportunities for them to engage and get the social dynamic that I believe is crucial to their learning. Like when I was a kid, the homeschoolers were the weirdos. I mean, they were socially awkward. But that's becoming less and less of an issue as homeschooling becomes a more viable option. And you can still be involved in sports, and there's homeschooling groups that we're part of, plenty of opportunities. So yeah, as you're well aware, I'm a huge advocate for homeschooling. Not to mention I get to decide what my children learn, not just with their learning, like their math and their reading and writing and all that stuff, but culture, the way that the world works. All of this stuff is coming from the most important person it can come from, their parents, not their school teachers or the government, what the government would dictate. Okay? All right, guys. Well, I'll answer this one too. Jason Schnitzer says, any hunts planned for this fall? Yeah, I'm going to be hunting here. We've got a bear hunt. We've got a turkey hunt. In another month, I've got a whitetail hunt with some friends, and I also might have another whitetail hunt planned for Pennsylvania. And we were going to go to Hawaii either late this year, early next year to hunt there with my wife and kids. But with the restrictions and lockdowns, that might not be possible. So maybe early spring for that. So we've always got something on the books because we enjoy that. All right, guys, I got through a lot. Hopefully I answered some good questions for you. Hopefully you got some valuable perspective from this and insight. Keep asking those questions. Keep sharing. Keep being resources for each other. Share the podcast. Join the Battle Ready program, orderofman.com/battle ready. And if you're interested, because I know there was a couple of questions about how to build organizations or groups of men and have some of this accountability and this brotherhood and camaraderie, then check out the Iron Council, which is our exclusive brotherhood. You can find that at orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right, guys, that's all I've got today. I will be back tomorrow for our Friday field notes. And of course, next week for our interview. And Kip will be back next week. Some of you are excited about that. Some of you, maybe you're grumbling about that. Either way, Kip will be back next week, and we'll keep rocking. Thanks, guys. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.